blow this up.
Look alive, Bomb Squad. We are back for another installment of Let's Blow This Up. I am your host, Jason Sircone. You are strapped in for another episode of the Let's Blow This Up co-host collective series on season 3. And today I am joined by none other, returning to the show once again, Megan Shields. What's up, Megan?
What is up? Super pumped to be here. Thank you again for having me.
This is appearance number 3 on Let's Blow This Up. So you're starting to catch up with Jay Franzi and set records here. So today we're going to have some fun talking about ads, as we do when you typically join the show. And if you go back in the archives, you'll find a couple episodes in season 2 where I talk with Megan, and then also talk with Megan and her husband, Matt, both of Chime House Media. But today we want to dig a little deeper and really tap into some of the reasons why podcasters really aren't getting into this gold mine yet. And every day I go on forums, I see threads on social media, I see it in email newsletters. Podcasters are looking for ways to grow. They're looking for new ways to get listeners. And the advice that's given never seems to feature look at paid ads. And I wonder why that is. So we want Megan, who is the quintessential expert in this space, to give her feedback on why this is still such an untapped resource for podcasters, and ultimately why it seems so many are shying away from it. So, Megan, you spoke at PodFest 2025, and when we were discussing this episode today, you told me only a few people in the room when you gave your presentation were actually leveraging ads, or at least dipped their toe. So what do you feel is the reason why so many podcasters don't venture down this path and see how it could affect their podcast in a positive way?
Yeah, I think that there's a couple things that play into it. Like, one is I feel like podcasting's like really hitting its stride right now. Like, obviously it's been around for 10 plus years in some capacity, but I feel like in the past like 2 years, it's really started leading the way as like a great medium to not only build a business, but to connect with people and all of that. And so I feel like a lot of the advice that's given is from like previous strategies and previous things that maybe worked in prior years and hasn't really caught up to the different ways in which you can grow nowadays. And so I think that's part of it. And I just think that there is not a lot of people even doing it or talking about it. So like I specialize in it. So I always get out there and talk about it. And a lot of times I hear people saying like, I didn't even know that I could do it this way. So I just think there's that lack of education around it being even a viable option that's going to get results. And I also think that there's an element of fear. You know what I mean? Like, it's paid, you have to pay, it's paid advertising. Right. And so I think that there is that fear where it's like, one of the last things that people want to do, which is interesting because it's like, if and all of my clients are business owners with a podcast for the most part. So that's particularly what I tend to talk about. But like, if you get in this, like starting a business and you're putting together a business plan and doing all this, like marketing and advertising are one of the first things that you're going to budget for and plan for, because like you have to get the word out there. And so it's like interesting to see the difference in people approaching podcasting that way. So I think that there's a few different reasons that kind of go into the fact that like it's not really talked about and a lot of people aren't really leveraging it that much right now.
Yeah. And I think the people we're talking to here are primarily the people that are using podcasting for business as well. So it makes sense to think of this. And that's what I preach on the creation side. It's all about marketing. It's all about advertising, branding, positioning yourself as a resource that's going to help brands and help other brands, help customers, whatever your target audience may be. I think having this part of it in place as you launch the podcast, it makes complete sense, because if you're not utilizing social media for that aspect, even with the content you've been creating prior to doing podcasting, you're probably missing the mark, because this is where social media has gone. This is it now. 2025. I'm getting fed more ads than I'm getting fed posts from people that I would want to see. And I understand that it's more about that overall immersive experience. That's what they're creating. So I'm going to get that healthy mix of both. But as a business, if I truly want to tap into my target customer base, if I'm not doing paid strategies now, I'm missing a lot of potential return, but then it's probably not clicking in my mind that as I put podcast content into this, the blogosphere, the social media sphere, I'm probably not making the connection of that I should be putting paid strategies behind that too. Is that what you've encountered with people that you've first started to work with?
Yeah. And I also think that there is this inherent thought that having a podcast is going to build your audience.
Very true.
And so I think that's another thing where like people don't put the connection in that, like Facebook ads and what I talk about is Facebook and Instagram. That's where I advertise mostly for my clients with this strategy. But I think there's a lot of like thinking like, oh, I'm going to launch a podcast. And it's like all these people are going to come to me, when really it's like, I have to get all these people to come to my podcast.
Right.
And so I think that there's just that, like, people just think that starting it is going to bring people. And if you already have a big brand, then and an audience to work with, sure. But a lot of people are starting their podcast fairly new, or they're early on in their business, their first couple of years or something like that. And it's not inherently going to build your audience. You got to bring people to it. And so I don't know if that answers your question or anything, but while as you were talking, it was something that like popped in my mind around, you know, the social media and like the audience building and what we're seeing, you know, paid ads versus organic and that kind of stuff. And organic reach is just rough. Like the algorithm's changing all the time. We are starting to see more paid ads. Now they're switching some stuff up where they're showing you stuff of people that you don't follow now. So maybe reach is going to get better. I mean, it's changing a lot. But the good thing about the paid ad thing is it's consistency. You know, you're not posting and praying when you're using a paid ad strategy.
Right. And I remember, I don't know if Facebook still has this on the login page, but it used to say free and always will be. And I think to a big degree, I think for the average user, that's how it is, because you can choose to go on at any time. You can choose to give them money if you wanted to, but just as an average user, you're probably just going to scroll through your feed or maybe go to a friend's page and say hello or post something that they might want to see. But overall, you're not thinking of the strategy of connecting with a target audience. You're just using it because it's there and it's free. But for a business, that line doesn't apply anymore. And I don't think there's anything wrong with that. I think most of us that have been in this world for a while saw it coming. And I think when you apply podcasting to it, podcasting is content. And that's something I've been saying for years now. If you're not treating your podcast content just like any other marketing content, that's a big mistake. So now you can take that content, put a paid strategy behind it, and actually get something from the people that you want to hear your show. And this ties back to what I said at the beginning. Podcasters, for business, for hobbies, whatever method you're trying to use this medium for, if you're looking for growth, why not try this? And I'm not saying throw thousands and thousands of dollars at it, but find a budget that works and see how you can build upon that. And I know this is something that you do with your ad strategy that we're going to dive into here in a moment. But overall, do you feel it's a mindset type of thing, or is it maybe that as they say, the old saying of the first person through the wall is the most bloodied, because this isn't such a proven technique yet? No one wants to be the first one to try to run through the wall. You've taken the reins on this and clearly developed something that can show this works, but maybe that's what's holding people back. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, I really just think like I don't know if that's necessarily the component of like they feel like they're going to be the first person to do it, but I feel like if they're not hearing it around them, then they're like, well, I don't know anybody else that's doing it, so I don't know if I want to do it. I think there's kind of that component, which is why I try to get out there and tell everybody, I'm like, this works, you know, blah, 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 here's what we're doing. But I think there just is that inherent hesitation when like they go to these groups and they try to ask for suggestions, and then, you know, they get the same stuff like, don't give up, just keep, you know, be consistent, you know, give value. And it's like, that's not helpful.
No.
You know, and maybe there will be some good tips here and there, or they go in and they say like, I'm thinking about doing paid ads. And then you get all the curmudgeons that are like, it's such a waste of money. Don't do it.
I did one ad one time and it did nothing.
That's literally it. Or they're like, they boosted a post to like, you know, a shitty show. And it's like, you have to think about what you're putting out there too. Like if you have stuff people don't really want to listen to, Like getting more people to it is not going to help you if the content is not good. Like
bingo.
That's the whole thing with paid advertising in general from like a business perspective. Like, because yes, I run ads for podcasts, but all my clients are business owners. And so it's like, if your offer doesn't match your audience, like getting more people to it is not going to make it convert better. So having that good content and having, like you said, that content strategy and treating it in that way will help you get those conversions of, you know, people actually wanting to listen to your stuff. So yeah. I think there's a couple things going on there with that.
Yeah, I could not agree more. You touch on a very good point, and I think it's something that I challenge all podcasters to do. If you're looking to get better results, start looking at your overall production from a much larger lens, a much wider lens, because more than likely it's not just one thing. It could be a number of different things or a combo of a few different things. Maybe your content just isn't what your target audience needs to hear, and it's not grabbing their attention. It's not keeping their ass in the seat. Maybe it's bad titles. Maybe it's horrible show notes. Maybe it's ugly cover art. There's a number of things you have to look at, but you can't hang your hat on, well, I've done all these things every single week and nothing's happening, because like you said, Megan, there are groups that will preach that. Oh, just keep going. But if you're not evaluating all of those different pieces, you're probably going to miss something. So yeah, if you do put shitty content out there because you're not focused on doing something that's going to engage your audience, you could put all the ads in the world behind it. It's not going to do any good. It's just going to waste your money because it won't convert at the end of the day.
Yeah, you have to know your audience. Like when it comes down to business and it comes down to advertising and all that stuff, you have to know who you're talking to, but especially on your podcast, because like that's valuable ear time. That's prime time. And audio has that inherent trust factor. And there's a lot of different things that are unique about audio in that people are taking you on the go. They're listening to you at the gym. Like they're engaging in it in a very different way than they do with any other type of content. Yeah. And so you have to, you know, have a plan, not just talking to the mic, and know who you're talking to. Otherwise, everything's going to be a miss.
No, I think that's a very, very good point, Megan. I just feel like if you're not building the content first, starting there, it's just not going to lead to anything that you want at the end of the day. So speaking of that, I think with what you've done with your trifecta ad strategy, it's speaking to that good content, but it's ultimately helping listeners that find your show connect with you in a number of different ways. So your podcast doesn't just have to be the number one and only thing that gets somebody converted to your message and ultimately patronizing your business. There's other outlets that you're going to utilize this content for. So if you could take us on a behind the scenes tour of the trifecta ad strategy and how all this comes together to ultimately use this podcast content in a very powerful way.
Yeah. So the strategy is called the trifecta because it focuses on using ads for 3 key areas of growth. And so the first area is actually taking that content. So let's say you're posting on Instagram, Facebook, you're posting reels, great content for your audience. Nobody's seeing it. Story of everybody's life right now is like, I'm posting stuff, I'm making these reels, you know, my messaging's dialed in, and it's just, I'm not getting the reach. Like I'm not hitting the people that I want to get. So I literally will take those pieces of content that they've already made and put $1, $2, $5 a day behind it and get it out in front of a new audience and getting them to engage with it. Not just getting visibility, but getting people to actually like, comment, or watch the video, some sort of extra engagement, extra step, as opposed to just visibility, because we want people with a little bit more intent, but getting them to engage with that content. And that does 2 different things. So one, obviously it gets your brand and your business in front of more people consistently all the time, and it's pay to play. So when you're pay to play, you're guaranteed that reach, you're guaranteed that engagement, and it happens whether or not you decide you want to show up on Instagram that day. And then the second thing that it does is it actually allows us to build an audience of those people that are engaging with this content that we can use later on in various areas, whether we're going to do, you know, retargeting or whatever it might be. But now we have them in this custom audience because they've engaged with our content. Yeah. And then the second piece is helping build their email list. So email lists are super powerful, obviously as a business owner, but even as a podcaster, like that is, if you want sponsorships and stuff, like the size of your audience, like that's what sponsors pay for. Like they want to get in front of niche people that your audience is, because it aligns with them. And the more people you have and the engagement that you're getting, like the more attractive the offer is from a sponsorship standpoint. So like a lot of my clients are building their email list, not just for their business, but for sponsorship purposes. And the trouble with that is like, a lot of times people are just building it through like using a freebie or a lead magnet, but then it's like they have to show up online all the time and try to promote it. And you'll get like 5 people here or 2 people there. And it's like, you know, if you really want some substantial growth, just throw some paid ads behind that. And like, you can get people subscribing to your email list all day long. So like, usually you're going to spend, the typical rate is like $3 to $5 per subscriber. But I have clients right now that are getting leads for like $1.40 on their email list. And so for every $100 they're spending, they're getting almost 100 people onto their email list. They're getting whatever 85, whatever the math is. I'm not good at math, but they're getting almost 100 people on their email list. And so like, that's the cool thing about it too, is once you know what you're paying per lead, you can just scale that right up and be like, cool, if I want 5,000 people on my email list, here's how much it's going to be. And you can spend that 5,000 in 30 days. You can spend that $5,000 in 3 months, but it's going to be the same. Just kind of depends, but ads allow you to condense time that way, but it brings people to your list all the time. So whether or not you want to show up and promote your lead magnet, or maybe you're doing summits or doing things where you get like a big influx of people, but then it kind of dies down, ads allow you a consistent way to do that. So you're building that community that you can connect with all the time, because we all know, everybody says it, we don't own these platforms, blah, blah, blah. So like your email list, you own. And so definitely worth spending the money to grow it there. And then the third piece is the actual podcast piece as well. So driving traffic directly to the show. And the great thing about Facebook is that they know, you know, our behaviors, our interests. They know a lot about us because we've been on there now for 30 years. I think Facebook's been around. And so they know our behaviors. 20. They know what we're into, and they know 20, and they know like what people are going to interact with what. And so like we can create audiences of people that are that are interested in what our podcast is about and put it right in front of them. So you're not wasting time putting your ads in front of people that it's not going to resonate with. And so you get those right people right off the rip. And so it's a lot of top of funnel activity, bringing people in these 3 different ways. And then I'll do a different like retargeting, which retargeting is one of those words that like advertisers throw around and people think it's like this big, like complex thing. All it really means is to show somebody your stuff again. So somebody that's already engaged with you in some kind of way, let's say they went to your website or they clicked on our podcast ad, we're going to show them then more things. So more pieces of content to position you as an expert, but really create an ecosystem that is continuously bringing in new people, but then continuing to show you and your message and your brand and position you in a way where you're the expert, you're that person that they're thinking of for like that particular niche that you're in. Because there was a quote that I read, way back when I started my business, like 5 years ago. It was like, marketing's not about making people buy, but being the person they think of when they're ready to. And that's really what it's about, is like creating this ecosystem of visibility and being that person that they think of, but also engaging with people in a lot of different ways, because people consume content differently. Some people like video, some people like audio, some people like to read. And so with this strategy, they can listen to different episodes, or they can go to your website, read the blog. They can, go to your Instagram and consume content there. I mean, there's a lot of different ways, but it's keeping all of that in front of them. So you have the opportunity to really reach more of that audience by using audio and then the email list and the content and all of those things all together.
I'm a firm believer that we all consume content in a number of ways. It's not just one. We might have a preference of one over the other, but at some point in our day-to-day activities, we're probably going to watch a video, probably going to listen to something on a podcast. We're probably going to read something. So the point is, your content from a podcast can serve all of those masters. Don't leave something on the table. Make sure it's all in place so people can consume your content when it's convenient for them. So in the car, you're probably not reading or watching a video. You're going to consume the audio portion. If you're doing that, don't do that around me. If you're watching the video, you're probably sitting at home, whether it's on your device or your television, or you're kicked back on the couch. Maybe that's where you want to read as well. So all this content comes together. Just a toilet as well. Honest. No, one, yeah. But yeah, we got nothing to hold back here. Absolutely. I know I consume a lot of content there. But one thing I did want to ask you, Megan, is as we bring all this content into play, it's focusing on a couple specific things. First, the email list. I hear that a lot, and I know you and I have talked about this before. people use these ads using their podcast content. Part of your strategy is get them on the email list. Once they're there, how is podcast content being utilized? Or is it more just now that they're there, is it more of just the marketing message? Or are you finding that your clients are having success with a healthy mix of both?
Yeah, that's a great question. And so the email list is a powerful place to continue to grow your podcast. So yes, if people are bringing, if the ads are bringing people into the show as well, but like, even if they engage with the ad and they go to the show, like we don't have their email list, their email information necessarily. Maybe we do, maybe they did join the email list, but that's why we want this whole ecosystem working to try to get as many people as we can. But like, the email list, there's a couple different things you can do. Like, depending on your lead magnet, you could integrate in different episodes that have something to do with the lead magnet and maybe elaborate a little bit more and getting them into listening to the show immediately. And then just if you get them into like a weekly drip, because once they come in from the lead magnet, there's the nurture sequence, and then they're probably going to go into your regularly scheduled programming of whatever your weekly newsletter or something is. That's another way in which you can utilize different podcast episodes that are pertinent to what you're talking about. So one of my clients, she does that a lot. Like, her podcast is one of her biggest lead generators. So not only are we bringing people in through the ads, but we're also growing her email list. And that's also helping grow the podcast. So all of this works together. That's why the trifecta strategy is created in this way, to have like maximum results with all of this going on at one time, because the email list is a prime place to get people to be listening to your show. But especially if you have like specific episodes on things and like, you're like, hey, are you trying to XYZ? Like, listen to this episode. It walks you through my 3-step process on exactly how you can do that. And you can like do that today. And it's like, boom, valuable. And it's easy for you because the content's already created. So you just plug it in. So I would definitely recommend, like, from an email list standpoint, putting your podcast in there in various ways as it makes sense, depending on like what you're emailing about.
And I think the podcast content serves as a great callback, because you may have an episode from a year ago and now this topic is relevant again and you're talking about it in your email campaigns. You can draw traffic or push traffic towards an older episode, and that's only going to help your show grow because you're getting more listeners. And again, old episodes it doesn't mean they're old. It just means that they didn't come out this week. They're valuable. There's a lot of content that you poured a lot of effort into. Just because it was done last year doesn't make it any less valuable. So continuing to call all that content back into play is just another way to repurpose and make life easier.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, and a lot of times, there is the bingeability factor of podcasting, which is great. But like, if your show is 3 years old, people aren't going back to episode 1 most of the time, so you have a lot of great content in there, pull from it.
Yeah, and they're sometimes you do get that rarity of something hooks somebody and they say, wow, this is great. I'm going to go back and I'm going to listen to everything. And I just experienced this with a client. And they went through and they downloaded the whole catalog. And we could tell just by looking at how the downloads were that day. It was like a few episodes said 1111 for way back in the portfolio. That's great. That's always a good thing, because the more they're listening, the more they're getting hooked on you and your message.
Yep, 100%. And the more they want to engage with you even further. So if they're on your email list, you can take that relationship to the next level.
Absolutely right. So let me ask you this about the third element, where you said getting them directly to the podcast through social media. What type of ad is going to make someone click and go to that level? And is it directly to the show on like Apple Podcasts or Spotify, for example, or do you recommend the ad point them to a web page on their website with the podcast?
Yeah, this is one of the most popular questions I get asked. People are like, how does this work? Like, what do the ads look like? A lot of times they're video ads. And I like to use an ad that's specific about the entire podcast itself. So like, you can put a specific episode out there. And I've done this before too, and just testing and doing different things. And it does work. But my philosophy around it is like, okay, if I'm putting an episode, let's say I have a business coaching business or whatever, and I have an episode that's specifically around hitting your first $100,000 a year. But I work with a bunch of other people that are, at different phases in their business and blah, blah, blah. But if I put out that ad that's specific about that episode, I might be missing a lot of the people that like are an ideal client of mine. And so I always tell my clients, like, I have a script that I give them. I literally have them do like a face to camera, like an Instagram reel, basically. Like, the more organic it looks, the better. Like, people are really like more attracted into authenticity now more than ever. Like, overproduced stuff, like, you can test it, it still can work. But super heavy brand assets and stuff, like, it doesn't have to be a fancy video. It's literally can be like a reel of you talking, which is typically what I have them do. And I have them talk about the podcast as a whole. Like, obviously you have to start with a hook. So the hook is like calling out your ideal person in some way, whether it's a situation they're in, a desire that they have, you know, calling them out specifically, like, oh, are you a mom of kids 7 to 9, whatever it is, like calling them out. Because the first few seconds, we need to stop the thumb of the right people, and we need to get the people that aren't our person, just keep going. And then getting into actually talking about the entire podcast. Like, people are always wondering what's in it for me and why should I give a shit? So if we can answer that in all of our marketing all the time, then we're going to have a higher chance of people engaging with us. And so I have them talk about the podcast as a whole and invite people to listen. So that's kind of like the top of funnel strategy of like bringing people in. A lot of times it's video. I have tested cover art. It depends on the cover art though, whether or not it'll work. And then I do a lot of like retargeting with specific episodes. So then you can show the variety of your knowledge, like different things, like some of the best performing ones that are heavily downloaded, the ones that we know that their audience like finds a lot of value in. We'll take those and put those in the retargeting sequence because now they've engaged with the podcast. But here are some episodes that you might be interested in. So I want to appeal to more people from a top of funnel perspective, and then kind of niche down a little bit underneath where we're then showing the retargeting to show more episodes. So to the second part of your question about like, do we send them to a web page? Where do we send them? I've tested the web page thing, but if you think about like, it's hard for me as someone who loves data analytics, because like I want to send them to the website because I want the data. I want to own the data that's on that page. I want to be able to see it. Right. But if we think about how people are using podcasts, and like think about the end user, which is, I think this is where a lot of people kind of miss when they're like marketing and advertising, is that they like they think that their customers behave differently than they do. And it's like, if you think about how you do things, that's pretty much how a lot of people are doing things. And so like people are at the gym, they're in car line, they're here, they're there. Like, are they going to pull up your website and listen to your podcast on a web page? Like, probably not. We need to make it easy. When it comes to this stuff, friction is not your friend. So we need to make it as easy as possible to get people into the show. So I will send them directly to Apple. So on Facebook, you can actually send ads directly to iOS devices and directly to Android devices. So I'll send Android people to Spotify, iOS people to Apple. I've also done it where I haven't chose that at all and send people directly to Apple. Most people are listening on Apple, especially if your audience is in the United States. And so I send them directly to the show. Okay. And the one thing I like about what like sending it directly to Apple is like Apple does a little bit of extra marketing for us that is free. And that is when you go into the show, it will then like populate at the top. And the next time they open up their podcast player, it's going to show your show up there, like additionally, because you clicked into it. So you get that little extra like, hey, remember me? You clicked into my show yesterday. Listen to some more of my stuff. And, you know, we don't have to pay for that. Apple just does that. That's how it works. And so that's what I do. Like I keep it simple. And because again, I have the rest of the ad strategy working, like I'm not worried about really having to get somebody to the website specifically to try to get them to listen there so that I can, you know, get the data. I do love the data, but like we have other things working as a whole to be able to kind of capture a lot of that. And we want to make it easy. Like at the end of the day, we want people consuming that content. We want them listening. And the fastest way to do that is get them into the player so they can start listening to it. And then when they go back into the player, there it is, versus them having to go back to your website to try to listen to more. Like people aren't doing that. They're just not.
Yeah. Well, and you think about getting them to that player as well. If you've got good show notes that will not only explain what the show's about, but also have links for the next steps and resources that can be heard within that show, that could be another way of, okay, first sequence was getting them to the show. They liked what they heard. Now there's links within the show that they can get to the website to get more information. So, well, Megan, clearly there's a lot that we could continue to unpack, but our time is up for today. And my recommendation to the Bomb Squad is to connect with you directly and learn more about how this can impact their brand and their podcast. So how do they make that happen?
Yeah, best place to find me is on Instagram, so at Chimehouse Media. And then there's links there to connect with me, and also chimehousemedia.com is my website. There's courses there, all the things, different ways to work with me. And then I love a voice note. So if you're on Instagram, like slide in my DM, say hi, let me know you watch a show, and always happy to answer questions and talk through things. So let's be friends.
Another challenge that I will give to the Bomb Squad is when you do slide into Megan's DMs, share some mafia material with her. That's pretty much what her and I do all day long. Just this looks
Sopranos memes get you to the top of the list.
Yeah, so if you really want to get in Megan's good graces and get the good inside stuff, start with Tony Soprano memes. That's where I'll begin. All right, 100%. Megan. I want to thank you for, first of all, being a part of the co-host collective this season, and as always, bringing tremendous value to Let's Blow This Up.
Thank you for having me.
And Bomb Squad, we will see you again on the next episode. Until that day comes, stay explosive.